So making a reversible headband is a super easy thing to do. First thing you do is start with 2 strips of fabric that you like and coordinate, or make them not coordinate and have something just really funky and fun. So I'm starting with 2 pieces that are 22 inches by 3 inches, but I have a really huge head, so my guess is most people do not need a length that's the full 22 inches. You could probably get away with 20 inches. So that's the first step. Then once you have those cut, you're going to pin them together. Pinning them together looks like this. I actually like my headbands to do just a little bit of taper along the back at the nape of the neck so that it's kind of out of your way and it's not poking at the neck. So I'm going to draw on my seam allowances at a 1/2 inch here, and I'm going to taper the ends so that they kind of come together. And then as we stitch this together, go ahead and leave a pretty good sizable gap on one side, like 3 inches on one of the sides open so that you can flip the headband out. You're also going to leave these ends open as well. So you'll just stitch up the one side and then you'll stitch up halfway and then leave your gap and then continue stitching. So this is what mine looks like once I've drawn in my marks here for my seam allowances. So I have disappearing ink on here, and I've just drawn in from here. Again, I'm going to leave this part open to put the elastic through, and then stitch all the way along this back side. And this is a cotton fabric, so I'll just do a basic straight stitch on this. Leave this gap open, and then do another stitch along here, coming up to this point. And you could stitch this all the way through, and then leave these gaps and try to fold it all the way through and just put your elastic on, but I don't mind having a little bit of a top stitch line along the edge all the way around, and that's what I'm going to use to hold the elastic through once I flip this. So now take it over to your machine and stitch it up. So when you're stitching this, again, it's just a straight stitch. Be sure that you do a couple back stitches at the beginning and end to hold your stitches. If you've done a taper on the edges here, then you're going to want to trim the seam allowances right here because this fabric would be coming out to here and it'd be too bulky in this area. So just trim that down and kind of trim down along those pivot points. They're kind of making not corners, not full corners, but trim it down a little bit there. You don't really need to worry about all of this per se, but we are going to go ahead and press this. So you'll press it with your sewing iron just to kind of set those stitches before we turn this inside out. So when I speak of pressing, you can actually just finger press this open, but then you'll want to get it wet, and it's folding on me. You want to get it wet and press it open with your iron, and you just hold your iron in place. That's what pressing is. So you'll just do that all the way around and just kind of set those stitches in there. So I went ahead and pressed on both sides just because I want to make sure that that fabric is all lying flat, especially where I have the gap open, because when I go to do the top stitching I want to make sure all of that's staying in place and exactly where I want it. So I have completely folded it inside out, and you might have to use your finger or a point turner to just kind of push along the edge on the inside to make sure that it's laying flat and it's not puckering together. So you'll want to push that all flat, and again, if you press these 2 pieces, they'll kind of lay against each other nicely like that on the open end. And then these open ends, just push them in so that you don't have a frayed exposed edge, and then we're going to press this whole thing, now that it's all put together, one more time before we put the elastic in there and sew it together. So the next thing to do is to take a little piece of elastic, and my headband is measuring at almost 21 inches right now, and I only need it at 22, so I need very little elastic, but I want to have enough to kind of shove into the inside here so that it stitches and it captures that, and then it only has maybe an inch or so exposed before it captures on the other side. So I'm just going to take this and stick it into here, do the same thing on the other side and give it a few stitches back and forth. So you can see here the elastic is in place. I'll just do a few back stitches and then forward. So I've sewn the elastic in on the one side, and then I went ahead and pushed it through on the other side, and I just used my bodkin to actually push that through and make sure it gets in there all the way. And that is not what a bodkin is for, but it doesn't matter. It works, it does the job. And then I'll stitch this again just on this outer edge right here, and then we'll do a top stitch along the outer two edges in just a second. Okay, to stitch the outer top stitch, a few things that I'm doing. I'm using red thread because it'll match this, and then it'll give it a little bit of a pop on this underside, which I think is fine. And then part of the way that I get my 1/4 inch stitch to be so nice and neat is that I use this piecing foot, and this is something that quilters will use. It kind of has a guide on this outer side, so it makes sure that your fabric doesn't come over or wiggle around too much, and it gives you a really nice, straight, beautiful line. So you don't need to have a piecing foot, but it's under $10 and it's a great investment, and you'll use it all the time for top stitching. Okay, I just stitched on the back side as well, and just need to trim some of my threads here, but that's as easy as it is. So now you have a super cute, super easy reversible headband. And now that you know how quick and easy these are, you can make a bunch of them in all the colors and fabrics that you want. So super easy to do, and a fun and a cute way to accessorize your outfits and your other projects you create.